Welcome to part 2 of my Vampire Race Guide. In this section we'll be going over the units of the Vampire armies and how they can be best used in battle to achieve victory over any opponent. Disclaimer, this guide is based on my personal experience and opinions and is by no means the definitive way to play the vampires. If you have a different strategy or want to add something to mine, please leave a comment down below. Now that that's out of the way, let's get into the video. The unit roster of the vampires is composed of various infantry, powerful shock cavalry and monstrous war beasts. Before I get into anything, there's something about the vampire units that make them very different to play as or against. When they lose morale, units do not break and leave the battle, they instead start to crumble, which means they will start to fall apart and lose health, and eventually they will start to disintegrate and lose health even faster until the unit is wiped out completely. This can be seen as a good or a bad thing, as they will never flee combat, but defeat for vampires will generally mean the death of most units. Onto the roster. Let's start with zombies, which are the literal meat of an early game army. They cost next to nothing and it really shows with their pitiful stats, but they aren't meant to be damage dealers. Zombies are a meat shield that charges the enemy ahead of your more elite units to soak up ranged fire or initial charges. They also excel at bogging down enemy units, preventing them from escaping combat or flanking your army. Skeleton warriors are up next, and they are the standard sword infantry for the vampires. Not too weak, not too strong, right in the middle. They are a shielded unit, so have some protection against skirmishers, but leave them exposed for too long and they won't last. They are best used as your frontline fighters in the early game, and your army should contain a lot of them until you unlock and can afford more elite units. Skeleton spearmen are basically the same, except they drop their swords in favour of spears, giving them bonus against large units. They are also shielded, so skirmishers are marginally less threatening. The spearmen are one of the few units in the vampire army who are effective against large foes, so it's a good idea to keep a couple of units in your army throughout your entire campaign. In battle I use them to focus down cavalry and of course large units on the battlefield before they cause too much trouble. Crypt ghouls are next, and they are a very unique unit. They are damage dealers, so you want to keep them protected from enemy fire and get them into combat as quickly as you can. They also have poison attacks, so can inflict speed and damage debuffs to whatever unit they are attacking. The ghouls are unfortunately weak against armour, so send them to fight against any more elite units will result in them being slaughtered. Overall, they are proficient at taking on individual units of unarmoured troops, but anything more and they will start to lose effectiveness. Graveguard are the first of the more elite troops in the vampire army. They are armoured and shielded, so are very tough to take down without armour-piercing units. Graveguard also are an anti-infantry unit, so excel at fighting even the toughest hordes of enemy infantry. They come in two varieties, with and without great weapons. Selecting great weapons grants armour-piercing damage but causes them to lose their shields and be more exposed to ranged attacks. A mid to late game army should have at least 2 units of Graveguard, as they are one of the most deadly frontline fighters in the game. Cairn Wraiths will finish up the infantry. These scythe-wielding terrors are a must-pick for their ethereal ability alone. It allows them to ignore most forms of non-magical damage, meaning they can stay in the fight for an extremely long period of time without suffering heavy casualties. They are also armour-piercing, so cut straight through any heavily armoured enemies with ease. They also cause terror, so their melee target will run in fear before long in combat. I would recommend taking 2 units in your armies as soon as you can, as they will destroy almost any hostile infantry you can throw at them. In battle, they are best used for targeting heavily armoured units that would otherwise tear through your front lines. Onto cavalry, starting with the Black Knights, or an anti-infantry unit. They are armoured and shielded, so are tougher than your average horseman, but are still best used to cycle charge, as they won't last long if left in melee with anything more dangerous than skeleton warriors. As with most cavalry, they are useful for flanking around the front lines and either attacking undefended ranged units or slamming into the backs of infantry stuck in combat. They come in 2 varieties, swords and lancers and barding. Units with swords are marginally better in melee, but it is still not advised to leave them there long. Lanced units have a higher charge bonus and can cause instant routing if a unit is slammed hard enough. Both varieties are available in the early to mid game and are an excellent addition to an army in those phases of the game. Hex Wraiths are basically Cairn Wraiths on ethereal horses, so have all the same bonuses they have. The main difference is that Hex Wraiths have Vanguard deployment, so can be used creatively to hide in certain parts of the map, and then charge the enemy before they have time to protect any exposed units. Being ethereal, they can last longer in combat than most cavalry, but it's still not the best use of them as a mounted unit. They are useful in the late game army, but not essential if you have no room. Blood Knights are the most elite of the vampire cavalry, and they are positively terrifying. They are armoured and shielded, so hard as nails, and also have bonus against large units. This doesn't mean you can just send them after a giant, however. They are still best used cycle charging and causing massive impact damage. They will fall just as easily as other cavalry if they get trapped in melee for prolonged periods of time. Blood Knights also have the Frenzy ability, meaning as long as their leadership is high, they will deal increased damage. In a late game army, you want to include a couple of these units at least, as they will devastate entire backlines if used correctly. The Chariots are up next, and we'll be starting with the Black Coach. This anti-infantry armour-piercing terror on wheels is perfect for charging down undefended skirmishers or retreating units. It has the ability to cause terror, so can be used on routing units to cause them to shatter and not return to battle. The evocation of death allows the Black Coach to reinforce its attack and defense using magic. This causes it to have a devastating charge and powerful resistance to damage. This unit is best used for charging down retreating units, units returning to the fight, or units about to leave the fight. The Corpse Cart is the cheapest of the chariot units, and it is only recommended for use in the early game when there is no alternative. It has a magical aura that buffs nearby allied units and debuffs enemies with melee attack and defense, and can also regenerate its own lost health while in battle. This unit is best used in the front line so it can buff your troops in a tight radius. The melee attack and defense stats mean it will not rack up many kills and it will likely lose health quickly, but honestly if you lose a Corpse Cart it's not going to mean the difference between victory and defeat. It comes in 3 varieties: the base Corpse Cart, a Balefire variant, and an Unholy Lodestone variant. The only real time it's worth having a base Corpse Cart in your army is when you cannot afford anything else. The Balefire version causes magic disruption in a close vicinity to the unit. This means that it is best utilised attacking enemy spellcasters, as it will increase the chance of a miscast. The Unholy Lodestone has a mass regeneration effect, which means that it will cause nearby friendly units to regenerate lost health. The Mortis engine is the final chariot unit in the vampire roster. This unit has a more powerful magical aura that causes damage to nearby enemies, and the mass regeneration heals nearby allies. The Mortis engine is also a magic harvester, which means that it increases the level of magic reserves, which of course means more spells can be called onto the battlefield. As if all that wasn't enough, this unit can also cause terror, so it's useful for ejecting powerful units from the front lines for a short time. Finally, the monsters and beasts of the undead army. The cheapest monster unit available to the vampires is the Felbats. While incredibly weak in combat, they are still useful for attacking exposed skirmishers and weak units returning to battle. However, even when attacking ranged units, they will struggle if left alone in prolonged combat, especially if the target is armoured, so it's a good idea to pull some infantry or cavalry around to assist them. Felbats are a valuable unit in any army in the early to mid game, at least until you unlock the next unit. Vargeists are, in my opinion, the direct upgrade for Felbats. They're bigger, stronger, and much more versatile. They can be used to charge range units and even some mid-tier melee troops, as they have a strong attack damage and get a bonus at high leadership thanks to their frenzy ability. Vargeists are also damage dealers, so are useful for quickly tearing through weaker or unarmoured enemies, but their low melee defense means they will not stand up to tougher or anti-large units, and will quickly lose morale. I believe Vargeists are a unit that can be used in your armies until the very end of your campaign, even if only one unit of them to take out difficult to reach skirmishers. The first of the vampire land beasts are the direwolves. They are an extremely fast flanking unit that can rout ranged infantry and be out of the fight before the enemy has time to bring in support. They also come with vanguard deployment, so can be placed close to the enemy lines and keep any key units busy until the rest of your army gets into combat, though they are very weak against armour, so will not do much against more elite units later in the campaign. All that being said, they are a fantastic cheap early game cavalry alternative that if used correctly can save your army from taking too much ranged punishment. Crypt Horrors are very much like their small cousins, Crypt Ghouls, with 2 major differences. They have armour piercing, so taking on more elite infantry will mean they rack up a large number of kills, provided they are not anti-large of course. The Horrors also have the regeneration ability, so will constantly regenerate any lost health while in combat, allowing them to last longer if stuck in prolonged melee. They still have poison attacks that will inflict debuffs on any target they attack, making combat quickly turn in your favour. They are best used to disrupt enemy battle lines, as they are large monsters so can ruin enemy formations with a strong charge, leaving them open to a swarm attack from your infantry. Once they have finished the charge, it can be useful to retreat them from combat to let them regenerate before bringing them back in to cause more havoc. I would recommend at least 1 unit of Crypt Horrors in any army as soon as they are available to you. The Vargulf is up next, and what a beauty it is. Who wouldn't love that face? These guys are devastating if used correctly, as they have fantastic attack damage. It is also armor piercing, so even higher tier units are not too much trouble. They also are incredibly fast, so can either chase down retreating units or flank around the back lines to reduce enemy morale, and of course focus down key targets. Vargulfs also have regeneration, so it would be able to stay in the fights for a very long time if it wasn't for one thing. Their leadership is extremely poor, and if in a battle they are not winning, they will begin to rapidly lose morale and crumble. However, even with the poor leadership, I believe they have a place in any army once they become available, as if they are correctly used and supported, they can get an outstanding number of kills on infantry units. Finally, the last unit in the vampire roster is the Terrorgeist. This absolute unit is a dominator on the battlefield, and can be used in many different ways to cause havoc in the enemy ranks. It has armor piercing damage, so can tear through all non-anti-large infantry like a hot knife through butter. It is also an anti-large unit itself, so can be used for focusing any cavalry and monster units your enemies might bring. Terrorgeists are also armoured, so can stay in combat for an extremely long time and stay at high health while causing massive damage. To top it all off, they also cause terror, so any unit unlucky enough to be targeted will flee for a short time after being attacked, though given the destructive capability of this unit, it's unlikely they will come back. I forgot to mention they also have Death Shriek, which is a breath attack that can cause huge damage to enemy units that are too clumped up. There isn't really a bad way you can use the Terrorgeist, as they just do that much damage, and can take so much punishment too. I'd recommend using them to get any particularly tough or well defended ranged units that Vargeist can't reach. And beyond that, just use it for general support where it is needed. Remember, it's a flying unit, so it can cross the battlefield extremely quickly. So if you have a unit losing on the other side of the map, just send this guy over and he'll turn the tide soon enough. The Regiments of Renown are the Vampire's elite units that are only recruitable once the log reaches a certain level. I'll show them compared to their regular units so you can see the difference. They have the Tithe, which is a zombie unit, the Knigstein Walkers, which are skeleton warriors, the Feasters in the Dusk, which are crypt ghouls, the Sternsmen, which are graveguard, the Dire Pack, which are dire wolves, Verix Reavers, which are black knights with lances and barding, the Chillgeists, which are hex wraiths, the Devils of Swartzhaven, which are Vargeists, and finally the Claw of Nagash, which is a mortis engine. That concludes this section of the guide on the vampire armies. The next section will cover the lords and heroes and what they can do for you both in the campaign and on the battlefield. Thank you for watching this section of my vampire race guide. If you want to check out the other parts, there's a link in the card and in the description to the playlist of the series. If you enjoyed this video at any point, please consider leaving a like, as it really does help out a lot. And if you want to see more of this type of video, maybe click that subscribe button so you stay up to date. After all, it is free. For now though, I was COLONELDAMNEDERS, and I'll see you next turn.